They told Earth to shut up. When the first human ambassador stood in front of the Galactic Council, unarmed, open-handed, speaking in clean, clipped trade language, the response was laughter. Real, public, diplomatic laughter. One of the delegates from the Yevnar Collective even broadcast it live. "Your species is admirable for a pre-mechanical civilization," he'd said, teeth shimmering like polished glass. "Return when you have anything of value." That was 3 years ago. They ignored every signal after that, every warning, every silent clip of kinetic rail testing sent across the void. Not one response, not even a diplomatic insult. The Council simply blacklisted Earth from all channels, locked out, forgotten, irrelevant. But Earth didn't forget. And Earth didn't stop. Captain Reiner stood motionless at the edge of the launch bay, the smooth steel floor vibrating beneath his boots as the last of the rail-loading armatures locked into place. 32 tungsten slugs, each the size of a small car, sat buried deep in the triple-barrel array, cooled and ready to launch. No fuel, no explosives, just gravity, magnets, and mathematics. Pure physics. Pure violence. He clenched his jaw. His eyes didn't blink. Behind him, the rest of Ravager-class Destroyer 01, codenamed Silencer, was a symphony of discipline and brutality. 500 crew, all human, all silent, all born from a world that had been mocked, dismissed, locked out from the stars. Now they orbited silently in the shadow of Kuran 4, a diplomatic outpost planet held by the Council. A planet built on the assumption that peace was guaranteed. Reiner didn't believe in peace. Not anymore. The message had been sent one final time, 2 days ago. A short signal. Same words, no emotion. Final warning. Earth possesses superior kinetic technology. This is not a bluff. They never answered. The old man back on Earth, Admiral Halverson, had given them a full 72 hours before ordering first strike. Reiner had asked for 24. The last hour was ticking now. No signals, no lights from the Kurani satellites. The arrogance of the Council hadn't changed. Still so sure humanity was beneath notice. Still convinced the silence of Earth meant submission, not calculation. Reiner's comms officer, Don, spoke low behind him. "Council fleet detected. 2 minutes out. Standard patrol loadout. No shields up." Reiner didn't turn. "Any message?" "Nothing." Reiner breathed in, slow and steady. Not anger, not hatred, just focus. Clarity. He wasn't here for revenge. He was here to correct the record. "Arm primary railgun, all barrels, sync for simultaneous discharge." "Aye, sir." Somewhere deep in the armored gut of the ship, systems hummed, capacitors charged, magnetic coils began to spin. The Kurani fleet came into view, sleek ships, curved like crescent blades, drifting toward Silencer without even a raised shield. No tactical maneuvers, no warnings. Because Earth was still the joke, the footnote. They'd forgotten physics doesn't care who's laughing. The countdown hit 0. Reiner spoke, voice even. "Fire." No thunder. No flash. Just the sudden, screaming absence of silence. 3 rods accelerated to Mach 15. Invisible death breaking the atmosphere before the Kurani command ship had time to register heat. On the planet below, diplomatic towers turned to light. The shield stations, always left cold in peace zones, vanished in the shockwave. The command ship's hull split open mid-sentence, as if the void itself had torn a page out of existence. The rest of the Council fleet scattered, too slow, too unprepared, too certain of their superiority. 3 more slugs followed. Then another. No flashy weapons, no AI drones, no energy beams. Just human engineering, pointed directly at arrogance. 10 minutes later, it was over. Reiner finally turned. Send the message, he said. Don looked pale. Message, sir? Same words, just one addition. He walked toward the command deck, eyes locked ahead, voice calm as steel. Final warning delivered. The silence that followed wasn't peace, it was fear. Deep in the core of the silencer, every screen was alive with chaos. Council broadcasts flooded the interstellar channels, scrambled frantic transmissions in 100 different languages. No unified command, no strategy, just panic. After decades of unchecked dominance, the Galactic Council was finally tasting its first loss, and it wasn't against another empire. It was against a rogue, backwater species they'd thought barely capable of orbital flight. They'd seen missiles before, lasers, plasma, even gravitational weapons. But nothing like this. Nothing so precise, so quiet, so final. Reiner stood at the center of the bridge as data rolled in. Don's fingers worked the console faster than they had in his entire life, sweat dripping down the side of his face. Council network is in full lockdown, he reported. Every major species is scrambling. Planetary shields going up across 12 sectors. Too late for shields, Reiner said. Behind him, Lieutenant Varric, weapons chief, kept his eyes on the orbital scans. The diplomatic fleet is gone, sir. No survivors. Council vessels at outposts 3, 5, and 6 are rerouting toward Quran's orbit, but he trailed off. But what? Reiner asked. They're not responding to hails. No orders, no formation. It's like they don't know what to do. Reiner nodded. They don't. Because for all their superiority, the Galactic Council had never been challenged. Not truly. Not by someone who refused to play the game. Earth had learned that the hard way. 3 years ago, the Council had dismissed humanity, not because of hatred, that would have meant they felt something, but because of disinterest, the way you might ignore an insect crawling on your shoe. You don't talk to it, you don't argue, you just assume it'll die or get stepped on eventually. Reiner clenched his jaw at the memory of the ambassador's face. Jensen had stood on the marble floor of the Galactic Council Hall, offering peace, trade, and alliance, and they'd laughed. Then they shut off the cameras and locked Earth out of every known star route. Even civilian ships were denied jump coordinates. That was when Earth stopped talking, when Earth started building railguns, and now they were listening. The screen on the far wall blinked red. An incoming transmission, unencrypted, Council standard band. Don's voice broke the tension. Sir, it's them. One of the Council command members. Not the central body, but high-ranking. Reiner nodded slowly. Put it through. Audio only. There was a burst of static. Then a voice. Clipped, high, arrogant, but trembling beneath the surface. This is Command Vice Helithron of the Valari Ascendancy, speaking under authority of the Galactic Council Interim Directive. Human Vessel Silencer, you have attacked a Council-sanctioned outpost and destroyed multiple diplomatic assets. You are ordered to stand down and await judgment. Failure to comply will result in your... Reiner cut the signal mid-sentence. Don's eyes widened. Sir, they're not here to listen. They're here to restore the illusion of power, Reiner said, voice quiet. They're still in control, in their minds. But we just embarrassed them. That's worse than threatening them. Empires fall over pride faster than over blood. He turned back to the crew. They'll retaliate, not immediately, but they will, they have to. Their whole structure depends on being unquestioned. Varric looked uneasy. Do we hit the next target, sir? Reiner nodded slowly. We keep pressure. Strike and vanish. 1 fleet, 1 punch. Then we move. We've got 6 more rail slugs and 3 fallback coordinates. Don hesitated. You don't want to hear what Earth says first. Reiner looked at him like he'd just said something naive. I know what Earth wants." And he did. This mission had been approved in shadows, beneath the surface-level diplomacy and speeches about peace. Admiral Halverson hadn't signed a declaration of war. He didn't need to. The old man just handed Reiner one line of orders burned into encrypted memory. "Let them remember us." That's what this was, a memory written in fire. The nav screen pulsed. Another Council planet, Tellus Prime, a communications relay hub, rotated slowly in the projection. Shield status, offline, fleet presence, minimal. Reiner's lips tightened. The Council hadn't thought to defend the soft organs of their empire. He pointed. "Plot jump coordinates to Tellus Prime. Silent run. I want us out of this system in 3 minutes." The jump was clean. Instant. 1 second they were floating in the ashes of Kuranv, and the next they were 2 million kilometers above a lush green planet, spiraling with data traffic and orbital tethers. No warships, no patrols, just station rings, corporate, diplomatic, soft targets. Reiner exhaled through his nose. They'd done this to themselves. He thought back to when he first volunteered for this mission. Not even a real mission back then, just a possibility. A what-if scenario if diplomacy failed. He remembered the meeting with Admiral Halverson in that dark concrete bunker under Oslo. No press, no cameras. Just 2 men and a grainy satellite image of a council cruiser hovering above an Earth civilian colony, a colony that later, accidentally, went dark. They'd never confirmed the council did it, but they'd buried the dead. Reiner turned to Don. "Target the comm towers, non-civilian, no scatter damage." Varric was already plotting trajectories. "Slugs 2 and 3 armed." Reiner stared out the viewport. It looked like paradise. Tellus Prime was the kind of world humans used to dream about colonizing. Oceans the color of sapphire. Grass like soft moss spread over rolling hills. Beautiful. Untouched. And owned by a species that had denied Earth water rights for 6 years. "Fire," Reiner said. 2 slugs dropped from orbit like angry gods. They punched clean through the towers, then buried themselves in the sea. No explosions, no flame, just craters where power stations used to be, and a world thrown into terrified darkness. Then they jumped again. 3 more jumps, 3 more targets, all non-military, all critical. A trade station on Belthora 9, a shield relay on Oryx Belt, a refinery deep in the mining fields of Zorak's spine. Each time, 1 strike, 1 message. Final warning delivered. Each time, no survivors, no response fleets. And each time the council grew quieter, but back on Earth, the noise was growing louder. Reiner's final jump brought Silencer back to the dark side of Luna Base. The Earth's military staging ground, shielded from public channels, hidden behind decades of media silence. They docked in dead silence. No trumpets, no applause, no flags, just steel and cold air and the eyes of people who'd waited too long for justice. Admiral Halverson met Reiner in the debrief chamber. No handshakes, no salutes, just a long stare between 2 men who had watched the world they loved get mocked, robbed, and forgotten. Halverson broke the silence first. "They're calling it terrorism." Reiner didn't blink. Of course they are. "They've started rallying fleets, 20 species, unified banner." Reiner crossed his arms. "They can unify all they want. Doesn't change physics." Halverson cracked the smallest hint of a smile. "Damn right." Then the Admiral turned, activating a wide-screen map of the galaxy. Dozens of red marks lit up. Fleet deployments, council hubs, possible counteroffensives. "We have 7 days before they make their first real move. They'll come heavy. They'll come angry. They'll try to erase us so they don't have to answer for underestimating us." Reiner nodded. "What's the plan?" Halverson looked at him, not as a captain, but as a weapon. We do what we've always done. Survive? No. Halverson's eyes hardened. We make them bleed for every light year. Reiner nodded once. The war wasn't coming. The war had already started. The news was everywhere. Every underground comm, every pirate relay, every outlawed feed across the galaxy. They were all broadcasting the same thing. Earth had struck back. And the blow hadn't been surgical, political, or diplomatic. It had been brutal, one-sided, and utterly unapologetic. The Silencer's strike runs had left 6 council installations in ashes and dust. No flashy energy weapons, no AI super warfare, just metal slugs moving faster than the eye could track, delivered with the precision of an orbital sniper. For the first time in 1,000 years, the Galactic Council had suffered losses from an unapproved species, a species they hadn't even bothered to classify as Tier 2. Now, Earth was no longer a planet. It was a problem. Back on Luna Base, Captain Reiner walked through the iron corridors like a man on borrowed time. The hum of gravity generators echoed in the walls, and everywhere he looked, men and women were moving fast, speaking low, and preparing for something no one had the guts to name out loud. War. Real war. Not border skirmishes, not trade disputes, not proxy battles on distant moons. This time, the target was us. As Reiner entered the command deck, the room quieted. Halverson was already there, flanked by senior officers, all watching a live projection. The display showed 12 council fleets, all mobilizing in tight formations, colors unified under a single banner. The Core Accord. A new name. A new war. They're not calling it a response, the Admiral said without turning. They're calling it a cleansing operation. Reiner's jaw flexed. Charming. They've labeled Earth as a contaminated growth. Unsanctioned, illegitimate. Their public channels are spinning it like we've destabilized galactic harmony. Because we fought back? Because we made them bleed. Halverson turned toward him now, eyes hard, lips pressed thin. The Core Accord fleets are en route. They'll be in the Sol system in under 5 days. 37 ships, at least 15 cruisers. We believe 4 of them are siege class. Reiner stared at the screen, cold calculation behind his eyes. How many railguns are operational planet-side? 5. 3 more coming online within 72 hours. 2 on Luna, 1 mobile platform above Mars. And Silencer? Rearmed, refit, ghost mode enabled. Reiner nodded once. Then we make the first move again. There was a pause. The room shifted. A young officer, Lieutenant Grays, cleared his throat. With respect, sir, they outgun us 10-1. Maybe more. We won't win a head-on battle. Reiner looked at him like a man inspecting a cracked rifle. Who said anything about head-on? He stepped forward, tapping the display, shifting the fleet map into a 3D overlay. Points lit up. Refueling stations, cargo relays, data beacons. These aren't war fleets. They're ceremonial, political. Built for intimidation and parade routes. Their crews are used to dominance, not resistance. You cut off their fuel, you blind their nav, you take 1 cruiser out of the formation, and the whole thing crumbles. Grays looked unconvinced. And if they don't, then we fire until we're empty. Then we ram, then we bleed, but they'll remember. Silence followed, because everyone knew he meant it. Halverson broke the tension. Earth's population is being moved into underground shelters. Global blackout in effect within 48 hours. Civilian ships have been grounded. Every orbital platform is now military assigned. He looked around the room. This is it. There's no retreat. If they reach the surface, it's over. Reiner turned. Then they won't. Down in Silencer's hangar, the mood was different, sharper, angrier. Crew moved in tight packs, reloading compartments, securing life support redundancies, checking pressure seals with hands that trembled slightly when no one was watching. These weren't born warriors. These were men and women who had spent most of their lives thinking space was a dream, until they realized it was a prison with invisible walls built by aliens who smiled with teeth and called it order. Sergeant Kellen met Reiner near the forward railgun chamber. The man was older than most of the crew, hard-faced, broad-shouldered, ex-miner from Titan with a voice like gravel, and no tolerance for hesitation. "They know what's coming," he said without salute. "They ready for it?" Reiner asked. Kellen shrugged. "Doesn't matter. They'll fight anyway." That was enough. They both stared out the narrow viewport at Earth, a perfect blue sphere hanging in the dark. Peaceful. Fragile. The place they were born, mocked, and shut out from the stars just for being late to the game. "They ever stop to ask why we built railguns instead of lasers?" Kellen muttered. Reiner smirked faintly. "Lasers are clean. Railguns make a mess." Kellen nodded. "Damn right." Meanwhile, far across the galaxy, aboard the flagship Virelian, Vice High Lord Kazir of the Council paced the gilded floor of his command deck. Tall, elegant, and bred from a long line of diplomats turned conquerors, he did not yell. He did not rage, but he burned with quiet humiliation. "They made us look like primitives," he said, voice silk over razors. "Yes, High Lord," his aide whispered. "Their kinetic weapons are effective." "Effective?" Kazir turned, eyes gleaming. "They killed ambassadors, governors, commanders, without warning, without permission, without process." He walked to the central display. A rotating 3D model of Earth hung in the air. "I want that world silenced. Permanently. No survivors, no martyrs. We will remove every structure, every signature. We will rewrite their star from the charts." "Yes, High Lord." "And when the last of their kind is dead, we will thank them for reminding us what war feels like." Back on Earth, as the countdown ticked past day 2, Reiner stood at the edge of the old Seattle ruins, a decommissioned civilian city now turned into a ghost town. Streets empty, glass towers hollowed out, every light shut off to avoid detection from orbit. The sky was quiet, too quiet. "Command says we've got 30 hours, Don's voice said through the earpiece. "Then they'll be in range." Reiner didn't respond right away. He looked up at the stars, invisible now behind the blackout protocols. Somewhere out there, ships the size of cities were crawling closer with enough firepower to turn continents to dust. And all that stood between Earth and annihilation was a few ships, a handful of railguns, and the will to say, "Not today." He tapped his earpiece. "Load Slug 6 into silencer. Prep stealth jump. We're not waiting for them to knock." Midnight. The silencer was cloaked in ghost mode, slipping past deep space satellites like a shadow through fog. No lights, no signals, no trace. Reiner stood in the CIC as the enemy fleet loomed ahead, barely detectable, slow, majestic, arrogant. They had no idea Earth was watching. No idea a railgun slug was already locked, calculated, aimed directly at the Virelian's command bridge. Reiner exhaled. Fire. There was no sound in space, but the effect was deafening. The flagship cracked open like an egg dropped on concrete. A second later, the signal from the Council's primary comm link went dead. Inside their formation, panic spread like fire. "Retreat vectors activating. Shields going up. Scatter formation initiated." It was chaos. They had trained for war, not loss, and Earth had just taught them both. The scream of the proximity alert cut through silencer like a blade. "Multiple contacts breaking stealth. Sector 4, closing fast." Don's voice cracked as he shouted over the growing alarm. "Those aren't scouts. They're warships. Council signatures confirmed." Captain Reiner didn't flinch. He was already moving. "Shut down ghost mode. Bring all systems to Combat Red. Tell Luna Base they've broken through. The lights on the bridge shifted from blue to deep crimson. The hum of railgun capacitors charging echoed through the ship like a heartbeat. Every crew member snapped into motion with the kind of speed that only came from knowing this was no drill. There were no simulations anymore, no rehearsals. This was it. Across the stars, Earth's worst nightmare had finally arrived. At Luna Base, Admiral Halverson stood before a holomap pulsing red with a dozen enemy signatures, like bleeding wounds scattered across the void. His weathered hand hovered over the control pad, eyes scanning each approaching vessel. They've split formation, his intelligence officer said, 4 in decoy vector. The rest are descending straight toward the Earth-Luna corridor. Speed? High impulse. They're done posturing. Halverson exhaled. Then so are we. He turned to the tactical console. Bring all rail platforms online. Wake every railgun on the planet. Tell every operator, this isn't about defense anymore. This is survival. A second officer chimed in. We've also got a signal. Encrypted human code, origin, outer low orbit. It's silencer. Patch them in. Reiner's voice crackled through the feed. They're coming fast and they're angry. We clipped their head and now the beast is flailing. Halverson responded without hesitation. How many ships can you take? Reiner didn't lie. 1, maybe 2, then we're out of slugs, out of luck. Then you make them count. Always do. The comm went dead. Reiner turned back to the bridge crew. Lock targets. First 2 cruisers, front of the pack. Strip their pride before they get close. Don hesitated. Sir, what if they've adapted? If they've reinforced hulls? Then we find out. And if we die, we do it doing the one thing humans do best. What's that? Punching above our weight. The first railgun slug launched. It moved faster than light, silent, deadly, unerring. The cruiser Ithalian never saw it coming. 1 second it was broadcasting fleet cohesion commands. The next, the command bridge and everything above Deck 12 was gone, shredded through by a slug the size of a transport shuttle. The ship folded in on itself, a grotesque twist of bent alloy and flashing panic lights before the reactors ignited, taking 6,000 lives with them. Fleet cohesion shattered. The other ships blinked, stumbled, hesitated, and Reiner hit them again. The second slug tore into the flank of the Haressa, one of the newer hybrid ships, all aesthetic curves and elegant engines. The hit clipped one engine bank and sent the ship into an uncontrolled spiral. Reload, Reiner barked. Slugs depleted, sir. We're dry. Then prep fallback. Bring silencer into Luna's shadow and go dark. We're no use as a coffin. Don looked at him, jaw tight. They'll come for Earth next. Reiner didn't look away from the stars. Then we bleed them every meter. The council ships didn't slow. Despite the chaos, despite the losses, their remaining 7 vessels pushed into the Earth-Luna corridor like a knife carving a throat. They were done with diplomacy, done with delay. The Varelians' destruction had been an insult they could not allow to stand. On board the lead destroyer, Tevelas Kai. Supreme Commander Harkon watched the feed from his command chair with furious stillness. So many species had fallen before the Council. So many colonies surrendered before a single cruiser touched atmosphere. But Earth had done none of that. Earth had hidden its weapons in silence, bled fleets without taunts or boasts, and then disappeared, only to strike again. It's not a war species, his advisor whispered. Not traditionally. Harkon's voice was as cold as the space outside. Then let's end their tradition. Over Earth, the first plasma strike hit Luna's upper shield. The sky above the moon flared like a dying sun. Thousands on Earth saw the flash even through the blackout protocols, a split-second burst of light that looked like the world ending. On the surface, automated rail platforms activated simultaneously. No fanfare, no countdown, just the sound of vengeance made mechanical. Tungsten slugs launched from 6 locations, 2 on Luna, 4 on Earth's hidden defense platforms. These weren't orbital warning shots. These were kill shots, each designed to rip through energy shielding and keep going. The first 3 hits landed clean. 2 cruisers shredded, screaming away into gravity wells, breaking apart as their internal systems collapsed. But the 4th slug missed. Not entirely. It scraped the shielding on the Azirak-class dreadnought, fracturing armor but not penetrating. Within moments, the enemy returned fire. Red spears of plasma cut through the upper atmosphere, turning abandoned orbital platforms into boiling debris. One round struck an unmanned station above the Pacific. The shockwave knocked out 6 satellites and temporarily disrupted ground comms. It was the warning shot. More followed. At ground command, deep beneath the Swiss Alps, the situation was spiraling. "They're preparing ground landing vectors," the tactical officer shouted. 3 ships moving into low-orbit descent. Halverson stared at the map, voice razor-sharp. "How many boots can they deploy?" 10,000. Maybe more, not counting drone support. Halverson turned to his deputy. "Tell Reiner to intercept." The man looked stunned. "With what?" "Whatever he has left." Aboard the silencer, the bridge was flickering. Half the systems were on backup power. The railgun bays were silent. Life support was dropping every hour. Reiner's body ached. His temple was cut from a support beam strike when the second plasma burst hit nearby. But he was still standing. He always would. 3 landers detected, Don said through clenched teeth. Targeting Earth's west quadrant. 1 headed for the Denver corridor. That's near the Arcadia base. Reiner didn't pause. "Turn us around. No stealth, no tricks." Don's eyes widened. "That's suicide." "Not suicide. Interception." He leaned close. "We get between them and Earth, and if we can't kill them, then we die in their path." The silencer roared to life. No stealth, no cloaking, just full burn, every thruster igniting as the ship shot toward the descending landers like a wounded predator. The lead Council lander, the Jalari, opened fire with automated turrets, spraying the space ahead with plasma bursts meant to disintegrate. But Reiner never slowed. His hands gripped the console, knuckles white as the hull groaned and lights flickered. "Bring us in close," he growled, "real close." "Sir, if we hit them—" "I know." A whisper. "I know." They collided just as the Jalari was entering Earth's atmospheric shell. The front of Silencer smashed into the side of the lander with impossible force, tearing both ships into spiraling pieces, fire and metal raining into the upper sky like a dying comet. But it worked. The Jalari broke apart, its troop bays ruptured, its systems failing. The remains crashed harmlessly into the ocean, thousands of soldiers never even reaching the ground. From ground command, Halverson watched the feed. His jaw trembled. He didn't speak for a long time. Then, quietly, "Reiner, you magnificent bastard." The sky over Colorado was on fire. Streaks of red plasma flared through the clouds, painting the world in a sickening glow as burning debris fell like metal rain. The Council's second lander had broken through Earth's final defensive perimeter and come down just east of Denver, slamming into the ground like a divine hammer. Trees, buildings, and bone turned to dust beneath its impact. And then the hatches opened. They weren't drones this time. They were soldiers, 8 feet tall, 4 arms, armor like volcanic rock fused with gold alloy, built not just to kill, but to dominate. The Volari shock troopers had landed. On the forested ridge overlooking the wreckage, Sergeant Thomas "Tom" Drenner locked eyes through the scope of his modified rail rifle, and muttered under his breath, "Well, guess they ain't here to negotiate." His squad was pinned down in the tree line. 10 men. No air support, no evac, no artillery, just scavenged rifles, reinforced ammo, and a deep-rooted refusal to die quietly. Drenner spat in the dirt, pushed his back against a tree, and whispered into the radio, "Command, this is Echo 1. Enemy has landed, full-sized. 24 dismounts confirmed, heavy armor. We're engaging." Static. Then the voice of a woman, cool, sharp, clenched with tension. "Echo 1, this is Fort Arcadia. You are last unit east of impact. No reinforcements. Delay them. Do not let them breach the mountain." "Understood," Drenner said, already moving. "If we don't check in within the hour." "You won't," he smirked. "Figured." Then he looked at his men. Some were fresh, some were broken in. All of them looked like ghosts lit by firelight, tired, hollow-eyed, but standing. "All right, boys," he said, crouching low. "That thing down there, that's what they send to finish wars." One of the younger privates, Renner, 21, former college kid turned rifleman, stared down the hill, his hands shaking. "We don't even have tanks." Drenner loaded a fresh mag. "Nope. They're gonna kill us." Drenner looked him square in the eyes. "Yeah, probably. But here's the good news, kid." "What?" He chambered around and grinned with blood on his teeth. "We only gotta kill one of them to make the others rethink their landing." The council troopers moved like a wall of death. They didn't bark orders. They didn't shout. They advanced in terrifying silence, rows of 4, shields interlocked, energy lances raised. Anything within reach vaporized, trees split, rocks melted, the air itself seemed to bend around their armor. But they weren't ready for Earth's woods. Drenner's squad had grown up in the dirt, hunted in the Rockies, fought in forgotten wars in abandoned cities. They knew terrain like it was family. First ambush was simple: mines. The second trooper from the left stepped on a buried charge, and the resulting blast launched him 20 feet into the air. When he came down, half his chest plate was missing. Drenner didn't wait. He popped up from a foxhole and snapped off 3 rail rounds directly into the exposed flesh. The thing didn't scream. It just collapsed. Then the real fight began. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't glorious. It was ugly. Close quarters, mud, smoke, screams. One of the troopers drove a plasma spear clean through Corporal Deke's chest, then used his body to bash another soldier against a tree. Drenner returned the favor by firing point-blank into the thing's open helmet, his rifle barrel cracking from the heat. Another trooper swung wide and launched a blinding concussive wave from its gauntlet, knocking 3 humans off their feet like rag dolls. Renner landed hard, ribs snapping, his weapon tumbling down the slope. The trooper advanced, towering over the kid, and just as it raised its arm to finish the job, boom! Drenner tackled it from behind, slamming a stolen council blade into the joint between its backplate and neck. The creature spasmed violently, black blood spraying over Drenner's face before it collapsed. Renner looked up, dazed. "You saved me." Drenner didn't answer. He just handed the kid his own backup pistol and kept moving. Fort Arcadia's alarms were already wailing when the first trooper drone broke through. The facility wasn't military, not originally. It had been a research site, deep underground, built into a mountain to withstand nuclear strike. But when the war began, it was repurposed. Now it was the command hub for the Western Resistance. And if it fell, the whole quadrant would fall with it. Major Ellis, commanding officer inside the mountain, barked into the comms, "Where the hell is Echo 1? Her tech officer, face pale, replied, "They're delaying them, but they're falling fast. We're tracking 12 remaining enemy hostiles." Ellis cursed and slammed her fist on the panel. "They need more time," the tech whispered. We have the prototype. Ellis froze. No, she said. Not unless... They're at the door. Drenner didn't have a plan anymore. He was bleeding from his side. 2 of his men were dead. A third was missing an arm. But they were still here, still moving, still fighting. When he crested the final ridge, he saw it, Fort Arcadia in the distance, its mountain gates beginning to close, and in front of it, the last remaining Villari trooper, the commander. This one was different, taller, colder, white runes etched across its armor in a language Drenner didn't understand, but felt in his bones. It saw him. It pointed. The challenge was clear. Drenner dropped his rifle. It was slag anyway. He pulled a long knife from his vest, scavenged steel from a council blade, welded to a human hilt, and he walked forward. The fight was short, brutal. The trooper was faster, stronger. Drenner was already half dead, but he didn't back down. He rolled under its first strike, drove the blade into its leg joint. It howled, swatted him into a rock. Bones cracked, his vision blurred, but he stood. He roared and charged. This time the trooper wasn't fast enough. He tackled it to the ground, slammed the blade into its neck, over and over until sparks replaced blood, and it stopped moving. Then he collapsed, breathing shallow, body broken, but smiling, because the mountain still stood. Inside Fort Arcadia, the prototype was sealed. A new railgun design, portable, smaller, faster, forged from what little Earth had left, and built with one purpose: take the war to them. Ellis stood over it, then turned to the last tech still alive in the lab. Ready it. We're not just defending anymore. She looked up at the sky, smoke choking the clouds. We're hunting next. The wind howled outside Fort Arcadia, dragging ash and snow across the scorched mountain pass. Major Ellis stood on the observation platform. Eyes locked on the ragged horizon, where smoke still curled upward from the remains of the council's lander. It was quiet now. Too quiet. The price of victory always was. Behind her, inside the mountain's reinforced core, engineers scrambled around a sleek obsidian-black construct. It looked like a tank, but longer, leaner, more angular, no visible weapons, no tracks. It hovered silently above the metal floor, humming with dormant power. Project Thorin, humanity's first mobile railgun platform. Not a ship, not a drone. A one-of-a-kind atmospheric strike vehicle designed to move through terrain and leave nothing standing. Built from salvaged enemy alloys and human ingenuity, and it had never seen live combat. Until now. Status? Ellis asked without turning. Her chief engineer, a rough-skinned man named Brigston, wiped grease from his forehead and answered through a clenched jaw. She's ready. You sure? He gave her a look. I've been sleeping under her belly for 3 years. She sneezes, I know it. Ellis finally turned. Good, because in 12 hours, we're hitting back. Across the galaxy, the Council was in shambles. The Core Accord had lost more capital ships in 2 days than in the last 2 centuries. Entire species were demanding explanations. Trade routes had collapsed. Refugee lines clogged the outer systems. The illusion of order, the lie of eternal dominance, had cracked, and fear was spreading like rot through their hierarchy. Inside the newly reformed war chamber on Vallis Krah, a planet-sized fortress moon built from pure obsidian, the elite council members gathered beneath a vaulted ceiling lined with gold and starlight. Supreme Commander Harkon, bruised and bitter, slammed a gauntleted hand on the table. You told me Earth couldn't sustain war. A bureaucrat, tall, translucent-skinned, draped in ceremonial robes, bowed slightly. We underestimated their manufacturing base. No, Harkon snapped. You underestimated their rage. and now we've buried fleets because of it." Another voice, this one dry and sharp, chimed in from the far end. "They fight like a cornered animal." Harkon's gaze turned cold. "No, they fight like something that remembers pain." He turned toward the war table, a galaxy map glowing with red zones that hadn't existed a week ago. "We're not containing them anymore. We're being hunted." Back on Earth, at the edge of the crater where the second lander had fallen, a convoy moved through the wreckage like a ghost. 4 APCs, 2 gun trucks. And in the center, Project Thorin, hovering above the road like it didn't care about gravity anymore. Around it, the survivors of Echo 1 rode in silence, what remained of the Western resistance units now reorganized under a new call sign, Blackline Company. At the front of the lead APC, Major Ellis rode shotgun, helmet off, eyes bloodshot but focused. In her hand, a small data pad scrolled through classified intercepts. Council fleet remnants were retreating from Earth orbit, bleeding, directionless, but not gone. Worse, intel suggested that a forward operating base had been quietly constructed on Earth's dark side, hidden deep within the Chilean Andes, shielded by atmospheric distortion and buried under adaptive camouflage. That was the next strike point. A hidden foothold on Earth? Unacceptable. Ellis tapped the radio. "All units, eyes forward. We breach in 6 hours. Thorin leads the charge." A gruff voice replied. Sergeant Danvers, one of Drenner's last standing team leaders. "Can that thing climb a mountain?" Ellis smirked. "Doesn't need to climb. It makes the mountain move." Inside Thorin's cockpit, Briggston sat at the control hub, flanked by 2 gunners and a young AI systems tech named Rhea. The interface looked nothing like Earth tech. No joysticks, no steering wheels, just curved metal panels with glowing veins of light, responding to touch, thought, and voice. "Power's stable," Rhea said, voice low. "Mag rails fully charged." Briggston cracked his neck. "Let's scare the galaxy." The convoy reached the base of the Andes by nightfall. What was left of the terrain looked more like a war painting: burnt trees, broken rock, and charred soil. Drone scouts had confirmed it. Council tech was buried in the mountains, deep tunnels, atmospheric processors. Even shield nodes. They were building a permanent presence, not an outpost, a colony. Ellis stood with her team near the ridge. The cold wind whipped her coat as she surveyed the entry point, a natural cavern widened by advanced excavation. No lights, no guards, but she knew better. "Danvers, take Bravo team and skirt the west. Plant the jammers." "Aye." "Rhea, give me thermal." The tech pulled up a display. Red silhouettes moved beneath the earth like insects. 30 to 40 bodies humanoid. 2 mechs. No air presence. "Perfect." Ellis lifted her rifle, checked the mag, and looked toward Thorin, parked like a sleeping god behind them. "Wake her up." The first strike was surgical. The ground around the cavern entrance exploded outward, not from an external blast, but from within. Thorin's kinetic round penetrated the shield node through the mountain wall, triggering a chain reaction in the tunnel's power grid. Lights inside the enemy base flickered and died. Before the Council could react, Ellis and Blackline were inside. Flashbangs, rail slugs, fire and thunder. The Valari engineers didn't stand a chance. Most weren't even armored. Their guards scrambled to respond, but Thorin fired a second round, this time down the length of the mountain, collapsing a tunnel and trapping a third of the enemy force inside. Ellis moved like a ghost, her rifle barking controlled shots through smoke and dust. Every breath burned. Every second was hell. But this time, Earth wasn't defending. This time they were cleansing. At the heart of the enemy installation, they found it. A beacon. Tall, angular, powered by pulsing crystal and wrapped in glyphs Ellis didn't recognize. Ria's voice cracked in her earpiece. "That's a subspace signal relay. They weren't just digging in. They were calling reinforcements." Ellis didn't blink. "Thorin, lock on target. Full discharge." "No countdown?" Briggston asked through comms. She raised her weapon and fired into the beacon herself. "I am the countdown." Thorin's final shot ripped the relay out of time. No fire, just absence. A hole in the world, sucking in light and sound until it collapsed with a thunderous, imploding scream. Hours later, as the sun rose behind them, the mountain was still trembling. Ellis stood at the edge of the smoking valley, face stained with dirt and blood, and let the silence settle in. Behind her, the surviving members of Blackline gathered. They'd lost more people. They always did. But this time, it had been worth it. The Council had built a doorway, and Earth had slammed it shut. In the orbit above Earth, what's left of the Council fleet watched the mountain burn from a distance. Admiral Vaetharn, highest surviving military official, turned to his second-in-command. "They took it." "Yes, sir." He said nothing for a long time. Then, "What now?" The aide hesitated. "We regroup? Plan retaliation?" Vaetharn shook his head. "No, we warned them." The aide looked confused. Vaetharn stared at Earth, voice low. "You can kill rebels. You can crush uprisings. But you can't stop a species that learns to love war." The War Council room beneath Luna Base was dim, silent, and heavy with gravity. The literal kind, and the other kind, the kind that sat on shoulders, behind the eyes, in every clenched jaw and sleepless stare. Major Ellis stood at the center, flanked by Admiral Halverson, and across from her, seated, alone, behind reinforced shielding, was a traitor. He looked human, but he wasn't. His skin was pale, translucent under the lights, not like a ghost, but like something built to pass. His eyes were too steady, his words too clean. The name he gave was Creel. "Start talking," Ellis said coldly, arms folded. Creel didn't blink. "You already know what I am. I know you were found near the wreckage of a Valari command pod, wearing a dead man's uniform, carrying Earth access codes we never issued. That's not all I carry," he said quietly. Ellis glanced to Halverson, who nodded once. She stepped back. The Admiral took the lead. "You're a hybrid," Halverson said. "Genetically engineered, Council-born but human-shaped. Why?" Creel smiled faintly. "Because the Council studies its enemies, and the only thing that terrifies them more than your technology." He tapped the railgun schematics laid out on the table. "Is the part of you they can't predict. Which is? Your rage, your memory, your instinct to fight back even when you've already lost." Ellis narrowed her eyes. "So what's your angle?" Creel leaned forward, eyes locked on hers. "I want to help you bring it all down." 12 hours later, Operation Godfall was greenlit. Not a raid, not a test. An invasion. Target, Valis Crux, the fortress moon housing the remnants of the Council's inner leadership. Intelligence confirmed by Creel showed cracks in their defenses, shield generators being rerouted, command structures fragmented, and internal factions turning on each other. "They're unraveling," Creel said during the final briefing, "but not fast enough. If you strike now, with Thorin and orbital cover, you won't just beat them. You'll break the idea of them." Admiral Halverson stepped to the war table, surrounded by Earth's top surviving military minds. He pointed to the weak spot, a polar trench housing a command nexus buried deep beneath obsidian. "You hit here," Halverson said. "You drop hard, you cut the head off. Then you hold it until the world watches their leaders fall." Ellis looked at the hologram. Cold, focused. "And if they don't fall?" Halverson met her stare. Then you bury them in their own damn fortress. 3 days later, the first human fleet in history to leave Earth space on an offensive mission slipped silently into hyperspace. 3 cruisers, rebuilt from salvaged Council wreckage and retrofitted with Earth's now perfected rail systems. 2 escort frigates carrying drop pods, mechs, and troops. And in the center, silent, hovering, humming with cold purpose, was Thorin. Ellis stood aboard the flagship Resolute, her armor black and stripped of insignia. She didn't wear rank anymore, only resolve. Rhea was at the API's table, tracking jump progression. Briggston was already aboard Thorin, now more machine than man, half his body rebuilt after the last assault. And Creel was watching the stars. "Council signal intercept," Rhea called out. "They know we're coming." "Expected," Ellis replied. "Any fleet movement?" "Negative. Internal traffic suggests civil breakdown. One faction trying to seize power before we arrive." Ellis smirked. "Let's give them something to fight about." They dropped out of hyperspace into chaos. Vallis Crux, once the crown jewel of the Galactic Order, now glowed with internal fires. Defense platforms were offline. Comms were fractured. 2 Council destroyers orbited on opposite sides. Weapons hot, but aimed at each other. A civil war had begun. Earth's fleet cut through the atmosphere like knives, their railguns silent but ready. Resolute held position, deploying atmospheric pods from orbit, pods that burned across the sky like falling stars. Ellis rode in the lead one, her boots braced, fingers locked around the mag-rail rifle slung to her chest. Across from her sat a squad of Earth's best, Black Line Company's veterans, survivors of the Denver Corridor, the Andes Assault, and a dozen other hellholes no one remembered but them. Danvers leaned forward, face still stitched from the last fight. "You think they'll run?" Ellis didn't smile. "No. I think they'll make us earn every meter, and I think we're the last people on Earth who don't mind paying that price." They hit the surface like thunder. The polar trench exploded upward as Thorin landed first, rail cannons primed and aimed at everything that dared move. Within seconds, Briggston fired the first round, not at a target, but at the trench wall itself. The kinetic force collapsed an entire defensive channel, burying 4 automated turrets and clearing the path for infantry drop. Ellis hit the ground next, rolling hard, rising to a knee and firing immediately. A Velari soldier, panicked, wounded, dropped before he ever saw her. Blackline moved like demons through the trench. No hesitation. No mercy. This wasn't diplomacy. This was debt collection. Inside the fortress, Creel moved with quiet familiarity, leading Rhea and a small intel team through winding obsidian corridors. The air was heavy with smoke and panic. "They'll protect the Nexus room," he warned. "That's where the Council votes, where they record legitimacy." "Why not destroy it?" Rhea asked. "Because Earth doesn't need to erase them," Creel said. "It needs to replace them." She understood. Symbolism. A new voice from the seat of power. Meanwhile, in the lower barracks, Blackline was bleeding. A counterattack surged from below. Heavier troops, walkers, drone swarms. Earth's soldiers were tough, gritty, but not invincible. Danvers took a hit to the shoulder, screaming through gritted teeth as Ellis dragged him into cover. "We're getting boxed in!" someone yelled. Ellis scanned the ridge above them, saw the shimmer of camouflaged turrets powering up. They were about to be slaughtered. "Unless... Thorin, this is Ellis. You reading me?" Briggston's voice came back through grit and static. "Loud and clear. I need a goddamn miracle. You'll get 2. A second later, Thorin launched vertically, using built-in grav thrusters to leap over the trench. Mid-air, Its dual rail cannons rotated downward and fired. The impact shredded the trench wall and every enemy contact on it. The blast blew out a chunk of corridor the size of a shuttle. The ground shook like the moon was cracking open. Blackline regrouped, pushed forward. At the core of Vallis Crux, the Nexus Room pulsed with light, golden arcs of energy flowing between ancient spires. The surviving council members had gathered in panic, many shouting, others weeping, and a few holding weapons, hoping for an impossible fight. The doors opened, and Creel walked in, followed by Ellis, Rhea, and 24 armed humans. No words were spoken for a moment. Then Ellis stepped forward. "You've ruled long enough?" A tall Valari ambassador sneered. "You think this makes you powerful? You're still outnumbered." Ellis didn't raise her voice. "We're not here to negotiate. We're here to make sure no one like you ever sits in this room again." One council elder raised his hand, as if to cast some final vote. Rhea shot him in the throat. Ellis turned to Creel. "Transmit it?" He nodded, and pressed the beacon console. A signal burst from the chamber, encrypted, permanent. "The council has fallen. The chamber is open. Earth now speaks." Above the planet, Resolute picked up the signal. Admiral Halverson stood with his hands folded behind his back, watching the live feed of Ellis standing over the ruins of the most powerful room in the galaxy. He turned to his crew. "History just changed." Vallis Crux was still burning when they raised the Earth flag. Not a pristine banner, not a global consensus, just a torn, ash-streaked standard sewn from the uniform sleeves of the dead, planted in the fractured floor of the Nexus Room, where 1,000 alien voices once debated peace, while ships burned in silence outside. Now the silence was different. It wasn't shame. It wasn't fear. It was waiting. Major Ellis stood at the center of it, her armor caked in blood, dust, and the kind of exhaustion that didn't wash off. Around her, Blackline Company held the chamber like holy ground, rifles ready, eyes sharp. Not for enemy troops anymore. Those were gone. Now they were watching each other. Because when power changes hands, friends start to look like suspects. Creel approached quietly, his steps too smooth for a war zone, his hybrid face unreadable. He didn't wear armor. He didn't need to. His defense had always been knowledge. "They've stopped shooting," he said. Ellis didn't look at him. "They're waiting to see if we shoot next. They're afraid." "No," she said. "They're calculating." She turned to him then, eyes hollow but locked. "What happens now?" Creel paused. Then, "We either become what we just destroyed, or we build something worse." Back on Earth, the world didn't cheer. There were no parades, no victory broadcasts, just quiet acknowledgement and the grim return to rebuilding. Cities were still rubble, oceans poisoned, skies cracked with orbital debris. But one thing had changed. Nobody was coming to enslave them anymore. Halverson sat alone in the war room beneath Luna Base, watching the live feed from Vallis Crux, Ellis giving her first address to the galaxy from the Council's seat of power. She didn't call herself a queen, or president, or chancellor. She said one word: representative, not of power, of pain. "We didn't come to rule you," her voice echoed through broken satellites and silent listening posts across 10,000 worlds. "We came to make sure you never forget that we bled." She paused. "And if you make us bleed again, we'll make you regret remembering our name." Then the feed cut. Simple, unforgettable, human. Ellis stood alone after the transmission, staring at the black glass walls of the Nexus chamber. The fires had been doused, the Council's symbols erased. The air still stank of plasma and melted ambition. Rhea entered quietly. "We have visitors," she said. Ellis turned. "What kind?" 2 delegations, 1 Volari, 1 from the outer colonies. Ellis rubbed her forehead. Already? Rhea nodded. They want to talk about the new structure, trade, borders, authority. Ellis muttered, They didn't come when we begged for help. They're here now. Of course they were, because now Earth had railguns. In the corridor outside the chamber, Sergeant Danvers limped up alongside Ellis, now wearing a mechanized brace over the leg he'd nearly lost. They want you to sign treaties? Ellis didn't answer. They don't get it, he said. We're not here to build an empire. We just didn't want to die with our hands tied behind our backs. Ellis finally spoke, voice low. We were mice in a room full of lions. Then one day, we brought a hammer. Danvers chuckled darkly. What's the plan? We stay dangerous. We stay honest. And we never let them forget what happens when you ignore a cry for help. Hell of a legacy. She looked out at the stars through the jagged glass of the broken dome. No, it's not a legacy. She turned to him. It's a warning. 3 weeks later, the first human delegation walked through the Hall of Ascension on Orthanus Prime, one of the original founding worlds of the Council. Their cities still glowed with polished marble, golden towers stretching into cloud-wrapped heavens. But the humans didn't wear ceremonial robes. They wore armor, dusty, dented, unpainted. The message was clear. We didn't win with beauty. We won with pain. Some species applauded, others bowed. A few glared. In the back of the hall, cloaked in shadow, a former council tactician named Vetharn watched the display through narrowed eyes. His fleet had withdrawn when Valus Crux fell, but he hadn't surrendered. Not truly. He was waiting, watching and building. He turned to his aide and whispered, They think this is peace. His voice was like ice. Let them. Back on Valus Crux, Ellis found herself alone more often. She no longer needed to fight. The battles were political now, economic, diplomatic. But something inside her had begun to fray. She missed the gunfire. Missed the weight of a rifle in her hands. Power didn't feel like victory. It felt like chains. Creel noticed. You need to leave the throne, he said one night. I'm not on a throne. You are, even if you never sit in a chair. She looked at him. What are you saying? He stepped closer. Let others govern. You weren't built to lead. You were built to remind people what happens when leaders fail. She looked at the stars again. And for the first time in months, she didn't feel pride. She felt alone. Rhea took command of civilian operations. Danvers became the first commander of the Earth-led Defense Pact. Creel disappeared. Some said he returned to the Volari homeworld. Others whispered he'd infiltrated the Council remnants. Ellis didn't ask. She didn't need to know. She returned to Earth 2 months later. No escort, no celebration. Just her and a cold sunrise over Denver's crater. She walked alone to the place where Reiner's name was carved into a wall of twisted steel. Below his name, Drenner, Brigston, Jensen, Deeks. So many ghosts. She pressed her hand to the wall and whispered, You were right. She closed her eyes. We didn't survive to rule. We survived to make them afraid to forget. The galaxy didn't erupt into celebration. There was no galactic peace, but something far more dangerous took its place. Silence, a new order, enforced not by politics, but by memory. Worlds that once mocked Earth now traded cautiously. Fleets that once patrolled human space now gave it distance. And railguns, those ancient, brutish tools of raw violence, every species wanted them now. But only one knew how to build them right. Only one had learned what it cost. And only one had fired them with rage. Ellis lived quietly after that. Her name appeared in books. Statues were built. her face on stamps, coins, even cathedral murals on distant moons. But she never returned to Valis Crux. She left that place for the diplomats. Her war was over, or so she thought. 10 years later, a new fleet crossed into uncharted systems. No flag, no signal, no warning, just black hulls and old council tech, rebuilt, reforged, and wrapped in silence. At its head, Admiral Vetharn. He had waited, he had watched, and now he was ready, not for vengeance, for correction. As the first warning signals reached Earth, as lights began to blink red across Luna Base once more, someone pulled an old name from a forgotten file. Ellis. They needed her again. Not to rule, not to lead, but to remind the galaxy one last time. You don't ignore Earth. Not anymore.